This week on BSD Now, we're going to be talking to Pawel about how his company uses BSD in their security appliances, including some trickery with SSL certificates. You won't want to miss this, plus all the latest news and headlines coming your way right now. BSD Now, episode 120. I'm talking about The Man in the Middle, recorded December 16th, 2015. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
We're glad to have you guys with us this week. This is an exciting week. We're just coming up on Christmas, or better yet, Star Wars is premiering in a couple days, so I'm in a very good mood today. But anyway, looking forward to that. We got a very full show today. Great interview with Pawel, who we've interviewed in the past, but we're not going to be talking just ZFS today. It's going to be a lot of security appliance-y things as well, so you have to stay tuned for that. But before we get into your headlines this week, we do want to take a moment to recognize the passing recently of two recent members of the BSD community. And Jürgen Locke, or more commonly known as Knox in the FreeBSD project, recently passed away as well. And we'll have a link to the in memorandum on the FreeBSD website if you'd like to take a look at that. And I'll let you tell us about Benjamin. Yes. I don't know if I ever met Jürgen, by the way. Did you?
I never met him, but based on the emails on the developers mailing list and so on, I know he was very helpful, especially with ports, helping a lot of people, but also with QMU. So Sean Bruno's had a special thank you to him for helping him get all the stuff so that we can have ARM and MIPS packages compiled on our AMD 64 machines. So all that stuff that people are obviously very thankful for. And Sean said, a lot of that wouldn't have been possible without Knox's work.
Great. Okay, and then I'll let you tell us a little bit about Benjamin, who also recently passed away.
Yes, so Benjamin, who is known as Creeping Fur on Twitter, but he was one of the key people for Beehive, among the early adopters of Beehive after Michael Dexter and then myself. Benjamin was one of the biggest contributors. Michael started with it very early and was, showed it off at BSDCan and got people interested, but and that's where I picked it up and did a bunch of stuff with it and gave the Beehive developers access to my newer hardware and so on. But then Ben was very key in the AMD support because he had access to hundreds of AMD machines and wanted to run Beehive on them. So he was a big catalyst for getting that going, but also doing the testing for it and so on. And then also, he was the first person to run Windows in Beehive and, pushing it with having thousands of Windows VMs running all on Beehive. And so a lot of that, the testing and so on, the fact that, when other people go to use Windows in Beehive, most of the problems have already been sorted out, and that was all thanks to him. He was also a very giving person. He sponsored BSDCan 2015 and EuroBSDCon 2015. Just personally, if you check the sponsors page, his name is just printed there, Benjamin Peralt. And he also helped sponsor a Beehive booth at the Supercomputing Conference so that more people who aren't even necessarily familiar with BSD would get to hear about Beehive, especially since virtualization is so popular in that supercomputing space.
Sure.
He also took all of the BSDs very seriously, not just FreeBSD. He was also a big supporter of OpenBSD and ran that for a lot of things. But even just recently, in lieu of Black Friday, he donated $100 to each of the BSD projects, FreeBSD, NetBSD, OpenBSD, and Dragonfly, instead of going Black Friday shopping like a lot of people.
That's a good way to do it.
He was also very helpful to a number of people in the San Francisco area who happen to be related to BSD and doing things there. When he kind of dropped off Twitter last weekend or 2 weekends ago, a number of people got concerned about that, and then we heard this weekend that he had passed. His friends, family, and colleagues had a memorial at his favorite bar. I had drinks with him there just 6 weeks ago when I was in San Francisco for the FreeBSD vendor summit. And so it was all a great shock to us. Michael also passes word that Benjamin's dog Jonas is in good hands and will be taken care of. I know a lot of people knew he was very much in love with his dog and wanted to make sure that was taken care of properly. But we don't know exactly what happened to Benjamin, just that after a night out, he was found unresponsive at his home and couldn't be revived. But if you're looking for a way to honor him, he recommended giving a donation to the BSD of your choice, since he supported all of them. And
it looks like you have a bunch of pictures here too in the show notes if people would like
there's
to
also
see.
some stories from other people. So that email there was from Michael Dexter on behalf of him and Peter and Neil from Beehive and so on. But there's also a story here from Phyllis, who met Benjamin at EuroBSDCon in Stockholm this year. And we all happened to be sitting around a table and talking about Beehive and so on. And so he shares a story there. If you want to read about that, I've included a link there. But yeah, there's a picture of Benjamin and I at a bar right near his house that we went to in San Francisco. This was November 1st, so just 6 weeks ago. And then he also treated Michael Dexter and myself to our first Burmese food. I had never had that before. And so when we were trying to pick something for dinner, he's like, I know something you probably haven't had before. And he treated us to that, and that was a lot of fun. And then here he's enjoying the hallway track at EuroBSDCon in Sweden. When we talked to his girlfriend, she said he very much enjoyed his trip to Sweden and getting to meet so many more BSD people that he hadn't met before.
Well, they will definitely be sorely missed, and of course our condolences both to friends and family of theirs. Okay, well, we got some other news here to get into, some headlines this week. So first up, we have a neat article here talking about on FreeBSD 10.2, how to set up Nginx as a reverse proxy for Apache, which is interesting here. But
people would normally ask, well, why would you do that? Because you could just run the website or whatever directly out of Nginx. Well, sometimes you have users that have a requirement, or an application that has a requirement of some certain feature of Apache or something, and you can't easily just replace Apache with Nginx. For example, the .htaccess files that some programs rely on and so on to be able to change things per directory or something isn't something you can easily do in FreeBSD or in Apache. And so the problem is, the downside of Apache is the default worker model means that the PHP code, mod PHP, is loaded into each worker, and that even if it's just, say, downloading a picture, that whole worker with that whole blob of PHP code is all sitting there using memory just to deliver that JPEG file or whatever, and so that can slow things down. And the biggest thing is that Apache, that each worker can only serve one person at a time, and it continues. So if the user has a slow connection to download that big JPEG or something, then that can tie up that worker for a long time. So if you put Nginx as a reverse proxy in front of your Apache, then when the user asks for that file with a slow connection or whatever, Nginx will get it from Apache very quickly because it's over localhost, or over even if it's not on the same machine, over the LAN, download that very quickly, buffer it, and then send it to the user. And that means that worker is now finished and can go on to the next request. And so, if you can't switch to Nginx, or it would take a lot of work to switch to Nginx, just putting Nginx in front of your Apache can give you quite a big speed improvement.
No, that's interesting.
Also, you can offload certain things. Like if it's just downloading a JPEG, you can actually have Nginx go around Apache and serve that file directly. But, any PHP scripts or whatever would go through Apache. But it depends what you want to do. But there are lots of reasons you would want to do this. So then the tutorial actually walks through doing it, which is pretty easy. All you need is a FreeBSD 10.2 machine and root access. So first, make sure you have all your security updates installed, but then you install Apache, install PHP and mod PHP, configure those to get them working. And then the big thing is change the port that your Apache listens on and move it to, say, only listening on localhost on port 8080 instead of, binding to every IP on port 80. And then use sysrc to enable that and get it running. and confirm PHP works and everything. Now install Nginx, and then it walks through configuring Nginx, the basic stuff, and then the more complicated stuff for the reverse proxy, and then it will just proxy everything to the Apache. And you can see here you can set the real IP header, because Apache, when it gets the connections, is going to see the connection of the user or the IP address of the user as being localhost or whatever the IP address of the Nginx is, not the original user. So by forwarding these headers, then Apache can know what the real IP address is. So like in your PHP script, you can use that. And it walks through the rest of that setup. It doesn't actually cover it, but you could also install mod RPAF, which is the real IP module for Apache. And you can say, if the connection is coming from this trusted address, like localhost, then take whatever's set for the X real IP header and change it in Apache so that in your log files and in your applications, you won't have to look for the X real IP header. You can actually, as far as Apache is concerned, it will see a real IP address. Yeah, and so it doesn't require any special configuration that way.
Yeah, that would.
It also shows setting up a number of cache headers. Like you can see it setting the expiration date on stuff, or actually showing whether Nginx is actually caching something. So that's the other thing of putting Nginx in front of your Apache like this is, you can decide that this script should only run once every 5 minutes, and we should keep the results for up to 5 minutes after that, which can obviously speed it up by not running the script multiple times.
Yeah, definitely fairly complete there. Well, it'll be interesting to hear if other people were out there doing that, but that definitely comes in handy to take a load off your Apache process. Okay, well, next up we have an article here that was recently in BSD Magazine talking about FreeBSD and FreeNAS in business by Randy Westland. So it looks like, what are they talking about here? A story about tent and awning company who switched from managing orders with paper to a computerized system backed by FreeNAS. So I know you wrote some of the notes to the sound. Why don't you tell us about
So they say, so the author, Randy, his dad runs this tent and awning company that makes tents and awnings for houses and businesses and recreation and so on. And previously, they had managed everything with paper, and they had like photocopies of handwritten notes and trying to keep things in files. And they'd run into problems where like two people were updating something at the same time, and then they had to manually deal with that. Manual merge conflicts on paper are not fun.
No.
So at first, he looked at some off-the-shelf solutions, and he found a number of cloud services that tried to do this kind of thing for businesses. With basically we're just Dropbox with some kind of management layer on top of it. But not only did these feel like poor solutions and were quite expensive, if that cloud provider went out of business or whatever, then what would happen to his dad's company? So instead, he decided to build something himself. So,
plus it's local.
And he said, fortunately, sourcing the hardware and getting the OS installed was the easy part. He just talked to IX Systems, ordered a FreeNAS Mini and a nice workstation tower. And then he said he set up the tower, which he called R2D2.
Which I hardly approve of, by the way. Coming from the guy who has all his systems named after Star Destroyers. Like, come on.
And that's the one that hosts the database and his web application in a jail. And then it replicates everything to 3CPO, which is his FreeNAS Mini. He says it's ironic that he named the tall, skinny tower R2D2 instead of 3CPO, but it's R2D2 has got the database, and 3CPO is the Samba share, so it's the one that talks to Windows and the users, right? So he decided that made more sense. And that way, all the data is also backed up offsite regularly. And since the data is absolutely mission critical, he didn't want any risks, and he's glad to have ZFS on his side for that. And yeah, with ZFS and the replication, especially for the database, I'm sure that helps a lot. And obviously, like you said, having it local, the big advantage is, you're not going to be bogging down the internet connection, because if you're a tent and awning company, you might not want to spend a whole lot of money on your internet connection, right?
That's right. Maybe not really good upstream
exactly,
or down
and it depends where you are and so on. It says that he replaced Dropbox with Samba using the C3PO machine, and the Windows machines in the office now install all their important data on the NAS rather than on their local drives, because the NAS is redundant and the local drives in your standard Windows machine really isn't. He says he also replaced their router with a APU board running pfSense and replaced their old PVTP VPN, which is not very secure, with VPN, which is, and set up a certificate authority on the pfSense and everything. And it's all web managed, so if they need to add more machines, they can do it themselves. They don't even need Randy to do it. And they said now FreeBSD in 3 different incarnations, because he's got a vanilla FreeBSD, FreeNAS, and a pfSense, has helped him focus on improving the company's workflow without spending much time on the OS and the configuration. And now there's an awning company that is, in a real sense, completely powered by FreeBSD.
That's really cool. We need more stories like this. If you guys know, if you work at a place or you know somebody who works at a place that does stuff like this, write up a story like this. Is really cool to hear, and it's neat that it got published in BSD magazine.
Also, if you have a story like this, you should also send it into ixsystems.com/mission complete. They're having a little contest when you send in stories about how you used, FreeBSD or FreeNAS or ZFS or open source or IX hardware to solve some problem or to complete a mission exactly like this. Also, if you're interested in web app development or phone app development, the article goes into some detail on the system he used to actually allow the workers to connect to a web app running off their FreeBSD machine there from their cell phones to enter information. Like when they go to somebody's house to measure how big the awning should be, they can put it right in on their phone instead of having to write it on paper and then transpose it into a computer later.
Oh, that's really cool. Okay, well, next up we have another tutorial this week talking about specifically Windows running under Beehive, which is kind of timely also recently with us talking about the passing of Benjamin. But now we have some other information out there about how you can also mess around with Windows under Beehive, a nice tutorial on it. But tell us a little about the secret sauce of this, Alan. How is it actually working?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, now that the world's foremost expert on running Windows on Beehive has passed, it's nice to see an extra tutorial to help make it easier for more people to get doing it. So Michael Dexter has some stuff on the FreeBSD wiki about how to do it under vanilla Beehive, but it can be a bit complicated. So this article here talks about doing it with IOHive, which is a little script for running Beehive. And some of the secret sauce, the big thing is Beehive, if you're running FreeBSD 11, now has UEFI support, which is required for Windows. So instead of, before you had to use Beehive load to load a FreeBSD kernel or the grub Beehive to load a Linux or OpenBSD or whatever kernel, this new EFI support allows, you basically provide a little EFI firmware image and then you can load the EFI loader directly from the, the Windows disk or whatever. The author is one of the people that works on IOHive, and he wanted to migrate away from VirtualBox, and but he still needed to run some Windows guests for things, and so he hadn't been able to get away from VirtualBox until now. So IOHive, if you get the version from GitHub, it now actually has support for Windows. A new version in the ports tree, 0.7, has most of the support, but there's a couple of extra bug fixes if you grab the GitHub version. But basically, the tutorial walks you through all the steps, including using a little script to extract the Windows ISO and inject an auto-unattended.xml file that describes how to do the install. Basically, because Beehive doesn't have a graphical console yet, you can't just install Windows, is the first problem.
There's no RDP into the installer.
I think maybe with Windows 2016, there's a serial way to do it. I'm not sure. But anyway, you set up this auto-attended script and say, install Windows this way, set the password to this, partition the disk this way, and run these commands. So basically, you unpack the ISO, inject that, maybe the Windows VirtIO driver if you're using an older version of Windows that doesn't have it, and then repack that ISO. And there's a script for doing that as well. And then basically you download the UEFI firmware from the FreeBSD website, from Peter's little hosting area on FreeBSD, people.freebsd.org. And then you can use IOHive to create a new Windows VM and launch it using that firmware. The first time you do it, it'll boot off the CD and copy the files to the disk. And then it'll reboot, and then it'll run the install off the disk. And then it'll reboot, and then you'll have your regular Windows. It also includes the commands for, in the auto unattended, you set up it gives you the commands to make it set its IP address if you're not going to have DHCP, and configure the serial console so that you'll be able to have serial management of the Windows machine enough to get it going so that you can RDP in.
It looks like, he's got remote desktop there enabled already, so you're pretty much ready to go at that point. That's neat. Yeah, hopefully this will get even easier and easier over time. I'd love to see like a native VNC solution or something in Beehive.
I've seen that in Beehive. It's just not released yet.
That exists. Oh, okay.
It was very slow and used a lot of CPU, but if it was just enough to get you through the installer, then that's all you really wanted, right?
Yeah, that's really the only place you need it to boot.
I think the problem was it required a bunch of things that aren't in base. So they're working on a pluggable framework so that you'll be able to, just from ports grab this module for it or whatever that would then have the dependencies of the SDL or whatever to be able to draw the graphics. But yes, that is being worked on.
Oh, that's good. That's good to hear. That would make Beehive really interesting for me. Like that. Okay, well, next up we have the BSD router project. We've talked about that in the past, but they've come out with a new release. 1.58 has landed with a couple notable new features. First of all, they've updated to FreeBSD 10.2 release, patch P8, so patch 8. A couple things they've done, though. They've disabled some of the Chelsea NIC features that you are not commonly going to use on a router, so stuff you don't need. They added a new easy installation helper option, so you can pretty much run system install and then just give it a disk, and it does its thing, and you're all installed. They've added back in some debugging symbols for the userland utilities, and they've also added the iPerf and the flash ROM package, which if you've not used, say, flash ROM before, that allows you to update system BIOS on supported boxes. So I guess that means you don't have to go find like a Windows CD and boot.
Yeah, or find a Windows machine on which to run the utility that then makes a FreeDOS floppy, which then installs the firmware for you. And then you're just like, and then you need something that will convert that floppy into a USB stick since you don't have a floppy drive. And you can get all kinds of ridiculous.
I'm really glad to see that package starting to show up now, because that was one of the most annoying things to have to do on systems where I don't have Windows set up. So, an important thing to mention, though, they said they corrected a UFS label bug that got introduced in 1.57. So if you're currently on BSD router 157, before you do the update, you're going to have to fetch a script from their site, and they have links in the announcement here on how to do that, which will fix the UFS label so you don't end up working your system. So take special note of that before you do the upgrade. And speaking of releases, we got kind of a 2-for-1 this week. We got OpenSense has dropped a new release as well, 15.7.22. And some of the importance of this new update is, of course, the new OpenSSL 102E and LibreSSL 225 have been updated. And they've also fixed a long-standing, I guess, kind of an annoying bug with filter reload timeouts. They said they finally identified and sorted it out, and now it runs quickly and glitch-free again. So that's been in there for a few releases. But, for good measure, they've thrown in a couple new ports as well. We got a curl update, 7.46. We got a squid update. Light HTTPD have been thrown in, and some other minor UI fixes. And I figured we would take the time, since we've had 2 routers get released, and remind folks, hey, the holidays are coming up, which means New Year's is just around the corner. If you're still running a consumer router, like maybe this is time to do yourself a favor and grab a box and throw OpenSense or PFSense, or if you want to do BSD router, throw that on there and get yourself ready for the new year. And don't suffer through a commercial ASUS anymore if you can help it, or D-Link or whatever you end up having at your house there. But definitely a good excuse to if you have some time off these holidays. Now, okay, before we get to our interview with Pawel, which is a fascinating interview, I know you guys are going to enjoy it, we do got to mention our first sponsor this week, which we're going to be starting with IX Systems. And of course, the website for that is ixsystems.com/BSDNow, where you can go fill out the form, get in touch with those guys, and of course, let them know that we sent you and you heard it here. But IX Systems will make sure you get taken care of and get whatever kind of hardware or software solution you need set up. But I see they also have a link here, Alan. Maybe you can show us and walk us through the new vCenter web client plugin. So what's this?
So if you're running VMware and you want to integrate it with their TrueNAS, the commercial version of FreeNAS, they have a new web plugin that allows you to integrate more easily and use the basically the vCenter plugin GUI allows customers to utilize workflows that are VMware centric instead of workflows that are, so instead of managing individual shares like you would in FreeNAS or whatever, you need your different volumes that are each one's for a different VM. So it basically gives you a different view of your storage if your storage is going to be specifically for, iSCSI or NFS data stores for VMs. And basically, you see each volume as the VM it's connected to rather than as just another share or whatever. And it basically just cross-references the data and gives you kind of better integration with the VMware tools and vCenter and so on.
Okay. That's definitely slick. Now, of course, IX Systems has all the expertise you need. So if you're in the market for some new hardware, you need a new file server, anything you want to throw open source on, I mean, they'll do, of course, they're experts in FreeBSD, but if you need to talk to them about some Linux solutions, they can hook you up with that too. And of course, they're the corporate parentage of a FreeNAS, TrueNAS, and PCBSD. So definitely want to support those guys and treat yourself this year. Even if you're not looking for something for the business, those FreeNAS minis are still really nice. And maybe you need to set up your local storage at the house here, do backups on it, or use it as your share. I know I do all my desktop backups to the FreeNAS mini. I think I got 9 systems backed up to it, and it's saved my bacon multiple times. I've reinstalled, I think, 5 of those systems over the last couple of years, and sure is handy to have that available on a FreeNAS mini. So again, guys, go to ixsystems.com/BSDNow and let them know that we sent you, and I hope you guys have a Merry Christmas. Well, we're joined today by Pawel Davidek, who's here to talk to us about FreeBSD security appliances. And of course, Pawel, we've had on the show before. He's a FreeBSD committer, and he's done a lot of neat stuff. But first of all, thank you so much for coming back. I guess we didn't scare you off the first time.
No, it was great. So thank you for having me again.
Well, great. Well, yes, thank you so much. And man, you've done so many things. There's almost too much to talk about, but we'll try and narrow it down for you today.
Yeah, I just kind of pigeonholing you in the corner at was it Bulgaria a year and a bit ago, and just hearing the story about porting ZFS and so on was very exciting. So thank you very much for doing that before.
Sure.
All right, well, you got the first
question.
You
guys enjoy
ZFS? That's all I use now. I couldn't use anything else if I wanted to. Like, I'm so dependent on it now.
Like it struck me really sharply the other day when I looked at, my new file server with 216 terabytes of storage. I'm like, if I wasn't using ZFS, exactly how would I have set that up? How would you?
How long will FS check take?
Yeah.
Or it's like, well, I guess I might have gone like the Netflix route and had 36 completely separate hard drives or something, or maybe do them in mirror sets. But yeah, even though it was just going to be terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a huge administration nightmare. Yeah. No, thank you. I don't look forward to those, or don't long for those days in any way.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay, Alan, you got the first question here about.
Yeah. So the first one we'll talk about is one of the appliances you created, the Fudo. Could you tell us a little bit about what that is and what FreeBSD technologies it uses?
Sure. These days I'm more active at my company than on FreeBSD, so I'm trying to consume all the stuff I did over the years, and others are still working on. So Fudo is one of them because we are a security vendor, so all our projects are around security. Those are appliances. So and Fudo is trying to fill gap because before Snowden, for example, people were very concerned with trying to protect themselves from the threats from outside. Right, you had all those firewalls, VPNs, and stuff like that, and it looked like the outside threat is not such big of a threat, it seems, because if you analyze some recent major security breaches, most of them are done by either employees or some contractors, consultants, or stuff like that. Because of course, if you are inside the corporation, you have some privileges, you can do a lot of damage, and there may be many reasons to do so. You either a cyber criminal, of course, but you can be bribed, but also you can be intimidated, for example. So even if you have employees with some privileges and they are trustworthy today, it doesn't really mean that they will stay that way all the time, of course, because I used to say that where trust begins, security ends. So you either you apply trust where you cannot apply security, which basically means that this is out of your control. So Fudo is trying to focus on monitoring all those privileged users. So we decrypt if it is necessary, and we record all the traffic for sessions like SSH, remote desktop, VNC, some database protocols and stuff like that. So, and then we can replay entire session exactly as the user saw it on his terminal window or on his Windows remote desktop client through a web browser. And of course, we give lots of tools to make it easy and simple to audit all this traffic easily.
Oh, that's pretty neat. So, are there any technologies that were invented for Fudo that have been contributed back into FreeBSD?
I don't think so. Well, the big changes we did for Open Crypto Stack, we did them to try to optimize, because of course entire storage in Fudo is encrypted with Jelly. So that's one technology I use that I created.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, maybe I should rephrase that. What key technologies are you using from FreeBSD as well?
So I think for Fudo, the key technologies from the security standpoint are, of course, Jelly, because we use full disk encryption, Capsicum as well. I think Fudo at this point is much larger Capsicum consumer than FreeBSD itself is. We use a lot of Capsicum because, of course, we deal with very sensitive stuff. So, and we also run a lot of code. Like for SSH, we use OpenSSH. For remote desktop, we use FreeRDP. So we have all those protocols with some alien code that we don't really want to run out of the sandbox. So all this code is sandboxed, and it's very tightly sandboxed. So even if you break in to such session, you cannot actually access any other sessions, any other recordings. You cannot even connect to any other server. You have only one descriptor to talk to the server, one descriptor to talk to the client, and one descriptor which is append only to store your traffic to the disks.
Okay.
So Capsicum is very, very handy there because the security requirements are really high.
And well, I also,
so Capsicum,
I remember you talking about, I think it's for the Windows RDP login screen, you have your custom login screen and it's limited to like 2 seconds of CPU time. So even if someone tried to break out, they wouldn't be able to do anything?
Yes, we actually split the session in 2 phases. One is pre-authentication phase, where basically the process which is sandbox have only 1 second of CPU time to extract credentials from the client. And when we have this login and password, this process has to send login and password for a process which to a master process, let's say, and the master process is responsible for authenticating the user. And only if the user is authenticated correctly, we will lift this CPU limit. We will pass the descriptor to the server, and we will pass the descriptor to file to store the traffic. So if you break in before authentication, you really have access to almost nothing. And once you are authenticated, you can talk to the destination server and store some data to one file. So that's not much.
Sure. Oh, that makes sense.
And of course, we heavily use ZFS because at some point I added to Jelly data authentication. So Jelly is able to check integrity of the data. But today it's not really practical, because it was more practical in times of disks with 512 byte sectors, because I could present Jelly Provider with 4K sector and just use one extra sector for all the authentication data, for all the checksums. But these days, when you have 4K sectors, it's really impractical to use Jelly authentication. And to be honest, block level is not the optimal level to store authentication data. So with ZFS, it's much easier to do so because you use Jelly for encryption and you use ZFS checksums, you use SHA-256 for authentication, which is much more practical and it's much better place to put integrity.
Makes sense.
So that's one ZFS use. Of course.
Well, you kind of have to use ZFS just on principle too, because you're porting.
But yes, we Food also use quite a lot of storage, so of course we don't want to spend too much time to do file system checks and stuff like that. But we also use ZFS send because Fudo supports also multi-master clustering. So you can have multiple nodes all serving the traffic, because of course Fudo is really pretty heavy on what it does, because every single session we actually pay encryption cost multiplied by 3, because we have to talk to the client, we have to talk to the server, and we have to store the data to the disks, and we do separate encryptions for all those directions. Also, for graphical session we do OCR, so you can actually search for text in graphical sessions, which is also extremely heavy and CPU intensive. So we don't want, if you have Fudo cluster, we want all the nodes to actually do some work. That's why we implemented multi-master clustering. It wasn't easy, to be honest, but I think it was worth it. And we use ZFS for data replication within the cluster. So we can only send incremental snapshots, which is very, very handy.
Are you using any kind of fancy hardware acceleration aside from normal encryption acceleration?
Not really, no. The heaviest encryption demands we have for symmetric encryption. And all this you have in Intel CPUs, which is pretty fast enough. With our optimizations for OpenCrypto, it's really fast enough.
Okay.
So one of the other appliances you have, the new one, is called Lynx. Could you tell us what that is and what it's used for?
Not the web browser, I assume.
No. We did borrow the name, but it's totally unrelated. But so Lynx actually also uses man-in-the-middle technique, but Lynx is a bit more controversial, I'm afraid, because you use Lynx. Let me try this way. So basically, in corporate networks, you do want to analyze or monitor the traffic, outgoing traffic, for example, to monitor data leaks. That's one direction. And the other direction, you do want to monitor network traffic coming to your corporate network, for example, looking for some malwares and stuff like that. And that's all good, but if you analyze corporate traffic, even now, like 50%, up to 50%, it's encrypted using SSL TLS. And of course, all those devices that can inspect this traffic are blind to encrypted traffic. So Lynx basically does man-in-the-middle on TLS and SSL sessions, but we try to do that very securely and in a civilized way, let's say. So for example, on Lynx, because of course Lynx doesn't use any weaknesses in protocols and stuff like that, it's all how protocols work. So Lynx, let's say, have two certificate authority certificates. One we call trusted and one we call untrusted. So when user is trying to connect to some encrypted site, we will intercept the connection and we will act as the server for the user. But before we start to do that, we will connect to the server, fetch the certificate, and we will generate almost the same certificate, but we will sign the certificate using our CA. And which one, trusted or untrusted, depends on if we can recognize the remote certificate as trusted or untrusted. So once you install trusted CA certificate into your employees' browsers, they will see no warnings for legitimate certificates. And of course, we also copy fields like not before, not after. So if certificate is already expired, the user will see the same warnings exactly as he will see without our appliance. And what is also important, of course, and I think that's a very crucial part of the appliance itself, is whitelisting. Because we also provide a subscription where we update IP addresses of some sites you do not want to inspect. For example, you are not probably interested into inspecting your employees' online banking traffic or your employees connecting to some healthcare services. That's probably not really a high risk of leaking data this way, but you do want to keep some privacy for the users. So, and of course, this 50% of traffic being encrypted will only grow.
Sure.
Because now you have Let's Encrypt. This is public CA, which provides free certificates. And it started public beta in like last week.
Just a couple days ago.
So there will be more and more SSL traffic, of course, because SSL certificates are more and more affordable. Now they are free. Also, HTTP 2.0, it seems that it will all be encrypted. So once HTTP 2.0 will be a standard, all the traffic, all the web traffic will be encrypted. So, and of course, after Snowden, a lot of services turn on encryption by default, like Facebook, Google, and stuff like that. So,
Sure.
so there will be more and more encrypted traffic, and the only alternative for you as enterprise would be to block entire encrypted traffic. But this would mean that you will block Google for all your employees and stuff like that. So probably it won't make you employee of the year.
Sure.
So that's why we are trying to do this with managing all the privacy the users need, with trying to managing all the security with with certificates of the remote servers. And I think we are doing pretty fine. And also, some of those appliances like data leak prevention appliances or some anti-malwares can also do man in the middle on SSL. But in reality, they don't really do that well, because either you lose a lot of performance or you have quite a few of those appliances and each one has to do the same stuff. So with our appliance, you can decrypt the traffic once, and we can feed many of those devices that inspect the traffic for different reasons.
Sure.
So how much of the inspection does the Lynx do itself? Like, does it have data leak prevention stuff in it, or is it only just offloading that to other devices?
No, it doesn't do any inspection at all, any parsing of the data, any malware detection and data leak prevention. It's just trying to be good at just decrypting the traffic and trying to be very fast, which is a pretty nice challenge. And of course, we use FreeBSD for that.
I was going to say that leads into the next question then. How does it use FreeBSD, or is there any unique things it's doing with the base operating system?
So we started to compare Lynx to some competitors because of course there is competition, although Lynx, it seems, is the only European SSL inspector solution, which is nice property for some, at least in Europe. But we are trying to compare the performance, and it looks like even without using any hardware acceleration, we actually can beat most of the competition when it comes to performance. Not all of them, that's why we are also talking to two providers of crypto accelerators. But the idea is that we want to have 4 sizes of links, and the high-end box would be called Infinity, and the promise would be that if something faster comes up, we will try to make Infinity faster. So that's the appliance which is the fastest one on the market, basically.
Okay,
cool.
But nice thing about this product, and on which I spent a lot of time, was trying to make the architecture fully non-blocking. So there were quite a few challenges with this, and I created a very neat dtrace script, which is already committed, but it prints the stack trace, kernel stack trace, and userland stack trace when the kernel function responsible for sleeping is called. So my daemon is only allowed to sleep on k event, the system call, and all the other tries to sleep will be logged as something that it's wrong, basically. And the challenge, for example, for trying to do such an architecture is that, for example, for network sockets, if your socket is non-blocking, you will get, of course, and you run out of socket buffer space, you will get an error, E would block or something like that. But when you are reading files, you won't get such an error, even if your file descriptor is non-blocking and the file system has to ask the disk, you won't get such an error. For this to work, you have to use async IO subsystem to make that work. So it was actually a really nice couple of months, I think, to create entire non-blocking architecture for links, and I'm still working on trying to fine-tune the kernel, trying to find the lock contentions, and over last week, when I measured only TCP connections that are terminated by links, I was able to double the number of new TCP connections going through links by trying to apply some patches from current, by trying to reduce some lock contention here and there. So it looks very promising.
So cool. How many of those changes will go back to FreeBSD?
I hope every single one, because that's not something that it doesn't really build our competitive advantage. And actually, we are also considering fully open sourcing links, but that's not decided yet. But hopefully, that will
let us know if that happens. That would be really
and that
neat.
actually kind of leads into our next question. You had been talking previously about the Zero Trust Initiative, and you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So Zero Trust Initiative has been something I've been trying to push forward very slowly, but I really believe that's something that can hopefully maybe even revolutionize the security market, but not only security products, because today the problem is that many vendors are either trying to hide code, maintaining that they will lose competitive advantage, and that's of course might be true. But also there are some vendors that are trying to open the entire development and try people to believe that the code is clean, the code is safe, secure, and there are no backdoors and stuff like that. But along the way, there are many problems with this. For example, with closed source products, of course, you don't have source code, so it's impossible to audit the code. So that's the biggest issue. But even with open source projects, the problem is that on one hand, you release the source code, but on the other hand, users are now most likely install all the packages from binary packages. they don't really compile, they don't really fetch the source code and compile by themselves. So how do you prove that the source code you publish was actually used to build the binaries you are installing? And that's pretty tough question. And there are some projects like Tor project or Debian, and in FreeBSD there is also a lot of work done in this direction to make the builds reproducible. So if you can define the entire build environment needed to compile the binary package, and you will get bit to bit the same binary blob from the compilation on different machines, you can verify and confirm that this source was used to build this binary. And I think that's extremely important. And really nice example why is that important is, for example, a security bug in OpenSSH. I think it was in the 90s, but the bug allowed for privilege escalation, and the only change was to change, let's say, greater sign to greater or equal, something like that.
Oh, okay.
And if you inspect assembly, only one jump was different. And if you inspect the binaries themselves, only one bit was different.
Wow.
So there is only one bit difference between version which is secure and version which is not, which basically has a backdoor because we already know the bug. One bit decided about security of the product. So it's really important for the build to be reproducible, and this somehow is very connected to the whole open source promise that you have the source code and you can verify what you are running, what the code is doing. And there are many other challenges. For example, you have, I'm not sure if you heard about Signal application for iOS. It's basically the most secure
like text messaging.
Not only text message, but also voice messaging, Skype alternative, whatever you call it. But it's the most secure I know, and they do publish source code, and they are trying to really do whatever they can, so the users are sure that their privacy is protected. But the problem is, how can I prove that the binary I download from App Store was built from the source code they publish on their websites? How I can be sure that someone didn't put some backdoor along the way? It's impossible at this point, and I think those problems has to be solved. The entire end-to-end path from the source code to the installed binaries, the whole path has to be. You have to have a way to verify every single step and entire path. So zero trust is basically about that, to try to promote and embrace, encourage such development flow. So everything is open, transparent, and you can verify every single step in the process.
Is that something that's actually actively being worked on at the moment to make FreeBSD able to do the reproducible builds?
Yes, Ed Mast just got back from the Reproducible Builds conference, where he's a bunch of those open source projects you mentioned were collaborating on making reproducible builds.
There was a talk, I think, at Asia BSDCon like 6 years ago on this, and I remember sitting in that, and it was, saying a lot of the exact same stuff you're saying here, and I don't remember whatever became of that.
So, what's the problem currently? For example, let's say we would like to release our products open source, as I said. And what this actually buys us today? Not much, to be honest, because without such initiative and without such knowledge of the people who actually use those products, we will only provide a favor to our competition, and that's all. If we were be able to promote zero trust as something that people actually care about, then releasing products in open source would be much easier for us, because then our competitive advantage of being zero trust compatible, let's say.
Or compliant.
And,
or
exactly.
okay.
And then we can actually use that to our advantage and say that this actually gives you a value, that you can verify our entire product. You can inspect every single line of code. You can verify that the appliance we shipped is actually built from this source code. And I think that's a really great value for security. And but it will work only if zero trust is recognizable globally. So that's a lot of work still in front of us. But and of course, we are trying to be realistic about all this. So of course, we don't want to ask vendors, security vendors, just open your products and that's all, because it's easy. Because it's not easy. But we would like to encourage vendors to maybe start new projects following this initiative, to trying to develop new products in open, or maybe offer two products. Let's say they will open fully functional with all the features, let's say VPN solution, but maybe provide at the same price, or maybe higher price or lower price. It doesn't really matter. A version which is zero trust, and maybe it will have less features. But let's see what market will choose. If people would prefer to have closed source product, which they cannot really verify, but has more features, or what people really need is just the core features and ability to know what they are running. That would be an interesting experiment, and not something that I think vendors will risk a lot. So there's a lot of tough questions, and we are trying to answer them during our presentations of Zero Trust, but it's really interesting.
That's something I know we'd be interested for PCBSD, because it's the same problem, right? We build all these packages and sources, and you really have to trust that what I'm uploading to the CDN is indeed built from those sources, right? And it would be that is a feature, to be able to say you can now verify, go run Pudre or whatever on your own box and confirm that yes, the LibreSSL we built is the LibreSSL that you have on your box.
The problem is actually even deeper. For example, in Tor project, where Tor is really, the developers are really interesting target for various agencies. So it's really nice property to be able to make the developer fully independent of the security cycle.
Well, so tell us a little bit about how the reception for this went. I guess you presented this at the RSA conference in Abu Dhabi. So what was the response?
So I think we still need some work to try to make it easier for people for one to understand, and also try to formalize it a bit. So because we have a lot of interesting random thoughts, but I'm not sure if people do understand still importance, and we don't really even know how we would like this whole idea to work, because of course we don't want to be entity for auditing the source code or something like that, because we don't want people to trust the zero trust initiative as well. We want people to evaluate that the ideas are valid, and but we don't want to be the trusted party and this whole thing. So we also are thinking how people can actually participate, how we can invite organizations, and what can we if we should create some initial documentation, how we would see project development to work. One reason that we are not pushing very hard yet is because we cannot really put our money where our mouth is at this point. That's why we are considering to start a project first and then try to promote zero trust more heavily. And this project was actually disk encryption based on Jelly. but we would like this disk encryption to be portable. Because of course we had TrueCrypt, which was also very interesting from a reproducible build standing point, because there was a work done to try to verify when TrueCrypt was closed or before, try to verify if the source code they published were actually used to build binaries they also publish. And someone did huge amount of work trying to reproduce the build, trying to find the right Windows version, the right compiler version, the right headers, libraries, and stuff like that. And even then, the build wasn't reproducible. So you have to inspect the binaries using hex editor and try to figure out what's the reason for the difference. Is it some stack canary random value, or is it some date which is embedded in the binary, or what's the difference? What's the reason for the difference, or is it maybe a backdoor? And the conclusion was that indeed the TrueCrypt was built from the source code published, but the amount of work was extremely huge, and I would really like this to be as easy as possible, so people can very easily verify stuff like that. As I was saying, we wanted to make a portable version of Jelly to actually provide what TrueCrypt provided, so portable disk encryption. Which
I'd love to see that, even aside from the zero trust. Just having portable encryption would be awesome.
Yes,
because Jelly is actually really, really nice. Like after playing with it a bit to try to get the FreeBSD bootloader to be able to read Jelly encrypted disks, and it's very elegant, and there's not actually that much to it. It's all just applying the crypto primitives correctly and so on. And I was like, I wonder how hard it would be to make like a fuse version of this, so that at least on a Linux machine you could mount a Jelly encrypted USB stick just to see what was on it or whatever. And it seemed like it shouldn't be that hard.
Yes, but to be honest, at this point I would even make the Jelly simpler, having all the knowledge I gathered developing Jelly. And of course, when I started to develop Jelly, there were not a lot knowledge about disk encryption. There were no XTS mode for encryption. Even at that point, using predictable initialization vectors was for CBC mode was considered secure, but something told me that it can't be right. So just to be sure, I implemented unpredictable initialization vector for CBC, and that was actually a good idea, because later it was proven that it's actually insecure. So I also learned a lot during the process. So now I will just make Jelly much simpler. For example, authentication is no longer practical, so I would remove authentication from Jelly for one.
Cool. So now to shift gears a little bit, what do you think the FreeBSD project could do to make it easier for vendors like you to build products on top of FreeBSD?
So FreeBSD is actually done quite a lot to make it easy. For example, there is a vendor mailing list where all the vendors can somehow share ideas or even contacts to some other vendors and stuff like that, which for us was extremely helpful. But I think what's really missing is that FreeBSD as a base system is really great, but for most of the vendors have appliances, and those appliances really need more or less the same kind of stuff. For example, every single appliance probably needs to send SNMP traps, or probably will have to handle automatic upgrades somehow, or signed upgrades. Or every single appliance needs some fault management system, which FreeBSD doesn't have. And there's a lot of stuff like that, like, for example, sending notification if something breaks, not only through SNMP traps, but maybe by email. And it would really be nice to have a framework like those to be either part of FreeBSD or be part of some kind of appliance BSD project, which is developed by all the vendors, so that we don't have to repeat those tasks. Every single vendor doesn't have to reinvent the same wheel.
Sure.
That would be really nice to maybe coordinate some of this stuff. We're trying to extract what people have, because also what's interesting is that vendors are developing changes to FreeBSD, and some of the changes are like 90% ready to be committed. And this 10% never happens because there are always more important tasks to do. Sure. Even in our case, where we made heavy changes to Open Crypto framework, we never managed to actually convert every single crypto accelerator driver to the new framework, because we just needed one or two of them, and we were able to convert 4 or 5, but not all of them. And because of that, the patch is not ready to commit, and it cannot be committed, and we have to maintain this locally. So I don't know. It's really not cool to put work of finishing stuff like that on somebody else. But it would be really nice if there will be some manpower that can extract those patches from the vendors, try to polish them, finish them maybe, and just commit them. Because I think most of the vendors have many 90% ready patches.
Yeah, I
wonder if that's something the foundation would do, where they specifically hire people to accept these patches and then do the last final bits to get them rolled in.
Because the other one you see is, a vendor has a patch and they try to contribute it, but there's a bunch of, the style isn't quite right, and you get a bunch of change requests. It's like, if we could just have someone in the project that would take on to do those little bits of cleanup to get it in, we might get a lot more code back from vendors, like you were saying.
Yes, it's all just a matter of balance, because of course for the vendor it is additional cost to try to maintain those patches locally. That's definitely a cost. But on the other hand, a cost of trying to polish and make those patches commit ready, it's also a cost. And it's a worse cost because that's immediate cost, not something in the future somewhere. That's why it's often very difficult.
Right, because finishing that patch right now means that some other work doesn't get done, whereas having to forklift that patch to a newer version of FreeBSD is a cost 3 or 4 years down the road, and it's easy to procrastinate.
Sure.
I'm afraid that's reality.
Okay. So what are the challenges specifically maybe of running a business that uses FreeBSD? Any pain points?
Well, we use FreeBSD extensively, not only for our product, but also for our entire infrastructure. So all our servers run on FreeBSD. Also, most of the developers use FreeBSD on their laptops, because not every single developer we hire is already familiar with FreeBSD. So that's, in my opinion, easiest way to be more familiar with operating system when you run it daily. So of course, FreeBSD on a laptop is a subject in itself. And,
have to have a whole nother interview just about that.
Yes, I will skip this one, but it does produce some pain for us. Other than that, I think well. FreeBSD, it's not a business tool. That's why our entire company, we use either laptops for developers, like ThinkPads, or MacBooks for all the rest, like marketing, sales, and stuff like that. So I'm not that radical to try to force salespeople to use FreeBSD, or
Sure.
Even though I'm running the business, it's impossible. So other than that, I think FreeBSD is pretty fine for us, but maybe because I know FreeBSD very well, so there's much less surprises for me than for others would be. But for us, it works great.
Cool.
Okay.
So what motivates you to keep working on open source stuff when you're obviously so busy with your business as well?
Well, unfortunately, I don't produce that much work as I did before. I checked the rankings at some point, and I was pretty productive for quite a few
You were
years.
prolific.
But nowadays, I'm trying to also push some of my developers to commit patches. For example, Mariusz Zaborski is already FreeBSD committer. He's working on Capsicum and Casper and stuff like that. Another developer, Konrad Witaszczyk, who was taking part in Google Summer of Code, who is working on encrypted kernel dumps. And probably Konrad doesn't like me at this point, but we were going through his patch for maybe 2 years now. But it's progressing all the time, and even yesterday he sent me the next version of the patch, and we are really close to be committable.
Nice.
So definitely I want this work to see in FreeBSD, because he put a lot of effort into it, and I think it's looking very well now.
Oh, great.
So
Looking forward to seeing that.
And that's a great thing to see, when someone who was as prolific as you isn't maybe doing so much work anymore, but at the same time still mentoring a bunch of new people to take over for him, right?
Well, in my career, I think that joining the FreeBSD project was like the biggest accelerator for my technical skills. When I started, I knew C, but I wasn't very proficient at C, let's say. And having access to all those great guys with all the experience, with people who worked on Unix even before I was born, having to access them on the conferences was, it's really, you cannot put price on something like this. And that's why I really recommend everyone who is a programmer to try to join some open source project and try to just extract all this wisdom and knowledge, which is almost impossible when you just work at the corporation or you are trying to self-educate or something like that.
Okay. So do you have any other hobbies outside of open source that you do in whatever free time you have?
Well, I have 2 kids, 2 boys. That's definitely a hobby for a long time. But also I really like fast cars. That was my hobby for many years now. So, and I also trying to play a little Texas Hold'em poker, which is interesting. It's I think it's illegal in Poland, except for tournaments, which are run legally by casinos, which very small buy-ins. So it's just you play for fun, and that's really nice as well.
Cool. And was there anything else you wanted to mention before we let you go?
I think we have covered quite a lot.
So. Yeah, this was good. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today, Pawel. And we're glad that you're feeling better.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed the interview there about all some of the neat things that Pawel's doing with his security appliance. But we need to get into the news roundup real quick. We got a lot of items here. And before we get into it, let's go ahead and tell you a little bit about DigitalOcean today. So if you've been watching the show for a while or listening on your podcast in the car or whatever, you've heard us talk about DigitalOcean. You still need to give them a try if you haven't yet. It's really cool to be able to spin up a droplet almost anywhere in the world and get it up and running with FreeBSD within seconds. I mean, it's under a minute in most cases. So how cool is that? And of course, everything's backed by SSDs, so you will have a fast little VM that really hauls. And of course, if you have to, you could even put Linux on there. They do offer that as another option. But OpenBSD can be done as well.
Yep.
So if you'd like to throw OpenBSD in one of their VMs, completely doable as well. But the website for that, guys, is going to be digitalocean.com, where you'll want to go get signed up. And when you do create the account, or if you already have one, don't forget to use the coupon code FREEBSDNow, which gives you that $10 credit. So you basically can run the lowest end VM for 2 months for free, which is not a bad deal at all, especially if you're trying something out.
And we say low end, but half a gig of memory is not bad, but also a terabyte of bandwidth on the internet on a gigabit port. And on the $10 plan, you get 2 terabytes. That's a lot.
So one of the things I set up a few weeks back is we do game days at my house. We have a bunch of PCs and we do big League of Legends tournaments, and we needed a Mumble server because we have people who we play with remotely as well. And boy, it was sure nice to be able. I found the closest data center they had. I think it was New York is where I put it. A 32 millisecond ping from my house or whatever. And that's where I set up the Murmur server so we could all do Mumble. And having that much bandwidth is just awesome. I don't even get close to touching that amount of bandwidth, but it is pretty slick. Okay, Alan, so we got some news here. It looks like some PS4 news. I know we've talked about that a little bit in the past, about the PS4 being FreeBSD based, but recently it looks like it made it into Network World. They were talking about a developer now claims that the PS4 has been jailbroken. So, of course, this isn't exactly a well-kept secret that PS4's proprietary Orb OS is actually FreeBSD based. But using this knowledge and a kernel exploit, the developer Seachert on Twitter here claims he was able to jailbreak a WebKit process and gain access to the system. It looks like on his, if you click the link here and look at the article or look at his Twitter feed, he posted a small tease to GitHub detailing some of the information gleaned from the exploit, such as a PID list and it looks like a rootfs dump as well. And of course, with these kind of exploits and whatnot, he's already requesting that users stop sending him requests about how to pirate games. Like, that's not what he's doing it for. So, but the ability to run and hack on or run homebrew apps on a PS4, which is FreeBSD based, sounds really interesting.
Things he points out are that this isn't the problem with the jail system on FreeBSD. The jailbreak word was more just the generic thing like on a iPhone and so on. This was all done in the kernel, which you can't access at all from a jail.
That's right.
But yes.
But it is pretty neat. It looks like that's happening. I wonder if they'll patch it here soon to prevent that exploit.
The interesting thing is because OrbOS is based on FreeBSD 9.0, it's possible that the exploit being used here is one that's already been patched in FreeBSD, and Sony just hadn't pushed out the change to the OrbOS because their version numbers don't list which FreeBSD patches they've applied and which they haven't. So it's hard to say if this is a new exploit that nobody knows about or if this is just exploiting something that's been patched on FreeBSD for a while now.
That is interesting. But yeah, you'll want to definitely take a look at the article. And if you want to see some of the dump information he got out of there, definitely take a look at that. But I don't know. I kind of missed the ability with like the PS3 where you could dual boot it. You remember that short period in time? Do you remember, Alan, where that was like a thing that they allowed and supported?
On older versions of the PS3, right? There was a PlayStation kernel for FreeBSD and NetBSD, and you could run it on there.
Yeah, I really wish they had something like that for the PS4, especially since it's more of a just an AMD 64 architecture.
Yeah,
like that would
less
be a lot
specific.
more interesting. But I say the cell was probably more of a pain in the butt back in the
it's
day.
like,
but
how would you get applications that work on that? But now,
right? Let me compile ports on that. Oh gosh, no. Okay, well, next up here, it looks like some Dragonfly news. They're looking for testers, in particular testers who have Intel NICs. So if you use the EM, EMX, or IGB drivers, it looks like Cephi has posted a request that he would like you to test his branch and report back the results where all those drivers have gotten an overhaul. So he mentions a bunch of different models here specifically that he's tested on, such as the 8257.1 all the way through 8250.80 and the i350. But if you have something different, I'm sure he would appreciate the help testing that out. And it looks like the EM driver was updated to 752, IGP was 243, and adds support for a couple new NICs like the i219 series as well. So definitely give that a whirl if you have any of those and have a Dragonfly, or maybe this is an excuse to grab it and give them some feedback. Okay, so what we got next here, Alan? Something about OpenBSD. It looks like Zen support is possibly coming down the pike here soon. So you can kind of file this under the this is kind of a tease as to what might be showing up here soon. But patches are starting to surface for OpenBSD Zen DOM-U support. So for those who aren't up on the Zen terminology, DOM-U is going to be the unprivileged domain, in other words, the guest. But the patch that we have at the link above is going to add a new commented out device to the generic kernel, but gives you something to watch for. So if you're an OpenBSD user and you need to be able to run it in Zen, keep an eye on these, and we'll bring you more information if some more patches start to land that turn that on or add new features.
Yes, because that could end up with the OpenBSD being available on Amazon EC2 and similar things as well.
Yeah. I'm sure as that matures, there'll be announcements and whatnot. So this is going to be interesting to follow.
Yes.
But there's your little tease, maybe something to look forward to in 2016. Okay, well, next up, also speaking of OpenBSD, they've got a neat patch that just went in recently for ThinkPads specifically. Another reason why the Lenovo ThinkPads are some of the best laptops currently to use with BSD. It looks like Katenis over at the OpenBSD project has committed a patch to enable support for the ThinkLight. So for those who don't have a Lenovo or don't know what that is, that's the little light up top usually, which will help illuminate the keyboard. So if you're in a dark situation, you can't see your keys, you can now turn that on in OpenBSD so you can work in low light situations.
And the newer ThinkPads actually also have a backlit keyboard. So between the keys, basically under the keyboard, there's a light. And so on my ThinkPad, it's like function key spacebar, and it turns on the light dim. And then again is medium, and again is high. And then the fourth one turns on the Think light that's up by the webcam and shines down on the keyboard. But this looks like they can control both of those from software inside the OS, which is cool.
Yeah, which is pretty neat. So he mentions that the patch right now only supports like the real deal Think lights. He does mention that there's going to be support added for other ThinkPad models later on. And looking through the code, it looks like there's no sysctls you have to fiddle with directly. It works by enabling the ACPI and keyboard functionality correctly. So you can now flip that on, flip that off at whim. And we could get that ported over to FreeBSD. I need that patch on. That'd be kind of cool to have. Doesn't look too big. Maybe somebody will take that up and do it. Okay, well, let's see. Next up, I know we mentioned conferences coming up, but we got another 2-for-1 deal. So we've been waiting for a while for Tokyo, Asia BSDCon to mention or to announce what their dates were going to be and issue their call for papers. It looks like that has happened now. So, and also at the same time, we have a BSDCan's call for papers out, even though the two conferences are several months apart. Not at the same time. The call for papers are both up. So first up is going to be Asia BSDCon this next year in Tokyo, and that's going to be taking place March 10th through the 13th. And then that's going to be followed in June with a BSDCan out in Ottawa, which is going to be June 8th to the 11th. So first of all, you should first plan on attending either way. Like that's just not optional. If you can't make both, I understand they are kind of geographically distant, right? But if you can get to one easier than the other, go to at least one because it's going to be awesome. You'll get a chance to meet me and Alan. We'll both be there. That'll be fun. I just booked my tickets to Tokyo a couple days ago or yesterday. And you
I booked mine as soon as I got the dates from Hiroki in Sweden.
That's right. Yeah, you went all early. I was all skittish, like I'm not going to book until they officially announce it. But I'm all booked up now and staying out there at the Villa Fontaine.
Oh, that's where I am
It's going to
too.
be fun. That's right. Yeah, you gave me the link, so I was like, I'm going to book that. So, anyway, you'll have to come out to Tokyo. I haven't booked Canada yet. That's a little farther off, but I will do that soon. But definitely you should make plans to try and go to one. If you can go to both, great, but at least one would be awesome for 2016. If you've never been to one, make that a New Year's resolution. Like, I need to get to at least one BSD conference next year. And then, let's see, where's Euro going to be?
It's going to be in Serbia.
Yes, Serbia,
Belgrade, I think. Or I forget.
And is there a Meet BSD?
There should be a Meet BSD. It's not announced yet, but there will be.
This was the off year. Okay. So yeah, next year we'll have a Meet BSD in the Bay Area as well. So there's definitely going to be a lot of options next year to choose from. But these are definitely some of the highlights here. I really love Tokyo, and Asia BSD Con's a lot of fun, as is BSD Can. So make an attempt to get there. But anyway, that's just if you want to attend. But if you want to give a talk, even better. If you're doing something interesting in the BSD community, say you're working on a project, porting something over, writing a new utility, I'm looking at you like IOHive maintainers and Relaunch D maintainers and all these different guys writing new cool projects. You should probably submit a talk to the conference about the new work you're doing on BSD. And come and give a speech about it. Cool thing is they'll pay for your travel and hotel as well. So you basically get a free ticket over to the conference, and we'll all get to meet you, and it'll be a lot of fun. So do try and get those filled out. When does the call for papers end?
I think both of them are December 31st.
Okay.
Sorry.
So,
for your AGBSDCon, if you're writing a tutorial, it has to be in by December 31st. For a paper, it has to be in by January 8th.
So about 2 or 3 weeks.
And then on January 15th, AGBSDCon will notify the people who are accepted, and you have until February 1st to get your final version of your tutorial and paper in. Because for AGBSDCon, they print a proceedings, a book of all the papers of all the talks, and so that's why they need them in ahead of time. Whereas the schedule for BSDCan here, they have all proposals end January 19th, and by February 19th, you'll be told whether you've been accepted.
Okay. Well, that definitely would be a lot of fun. Again, we can't stress enough, if you're doing neat things in the community, submit a talk. If you're just a user or even another developer and you can't submit a talk, just come.
But, you don't have to be a developer to submit a talk. If you do anything interesting using the BSDs, submit the talk. It's, at BSDCan, there were talks of people that were just using it, people that were using it for university research, all kinds of stuff. You don't have to actually be writing some crazy new tool or, building some new subsystem in order to submit a talk. We're trying to get more and more sysadmins and just users of the OS to come to the conference. And to them, a talk from another user that's doing something they might be interested in is more interesting than some talk about, how the internals of the networking system actually works. It's going to be way over my head, right?
But yeah, that'd be an awesome opportunity. And I'll give you a further challenge. If you're going to come, talk to us. Email me and Alan ahead of time. Maybe we can do an interview while we're there, because that's always fun. If you're going to be there in person, we can actually sit and talk to you about whatever you're presenting or whatever project it is you're working on or whatever neat stuff you're doing with BSD out in the field. We want to hear that, and maybe you'll get featured on a future episode of BSD Now. So how cool is that? You get to go travel somewhere neat and get to be featured as a guest on BSD Now. So we'll look forward to seeing you guys and gals all at one of these conferences here in the upcoming year. Okay, well, last up in the roundup this week. So we kind of teased this a little bit earlier in the tutorial about running Windows on Beehive. But IOHive, the utility mentioned there, has recently landed in the FreeBSD porch tree. So this is something a lot of us have been eagerly awaiting. I know I've been having my eye on it for a while. But a couple things about it we want to just explain to you folks. So first of all, it may share a similar name to IOCage, and that's not without reason, but it's also not directly related to IOCage. It's different developers and such. It's not sharing code. But what it does share is a very similar command line syntax. So if you've already used IOCage before for jail management, this will feel kind of at home. And some of the principles about how it uses ZFS as well for managing your jails/VMs in this case. So it looks like the current version of IOHive, which is landed in ports, is 0.7, but it already has a pretty surprisingly large feature set. I was pretty surprised to see some of the things that are already in there. But some of the features at the moment, for example, ISO management. So I guess the analogy would be jail management, where you fetch your template of FreeBSD 10.2 or whatever. Well, in IOHive, you'll be doing your ISO management, which is these are my Debian installers or my OpenBSD installers.
Or in this case, getting the Windows ISO and repacking it with the unattended stuff on it. Yeah.
So you have that ready to deploy. Think of that as your template. And then after that, of course, you got resource management. So memory sizes and assign network cards and so forth and so on. Looks like that's all in. And kind of neat feature, again, because it's ZFS based. You have your snapshot support. So you can now take a VM and clone it, create a copy of it, and now you've just duplicated your VMs. And it looks like it has all the hooks and support for managing OpenBSD, NetBSD, and Linux VMs as well. And of course, as we mentioned in the earlier tutorial, Windows features are starting to creep in as well. And there's some new things in the GitHub repo for that. So hopefully we'll see an update to 0.7.1 or 0.8 or whatever here in the upcoming weeks. But an exciting tool, and we're glad to see that land. We need to get him on for an interview at some point, talk about this and where they're going to go with it. Okay, folks, we got a bunch of beastie bits to give you and then some feedback and questions, which we have a long story as one of them, so we will share that with you. But before we get into those, of course, we need to mention our last sponsor for the week, which is going to be Tarsnap. And the URL for that is tarsnap.com/BSDNow is where you want to go. Get signed up, create an account, and of course, download a client. If you don't want to get the client from there, of course, it's in most likely your various ports, trees, package systems already. You can grab it from there. But if you're paranoid, Tarsnap actually ships the source code. So compile it yourself. You can verify that the binaries you're running is what you built from the code that you've downloaded and audited and done whatever you need to do to make sure you should trust this. And of course, Tarsnap's going to be very trustworthy. A lot of folks use this because it does what it's supposed to do, or it doesn't send your data unencrypted over the wire. Everything's encrypted before it leaves your box. You don't have to worry about somebody on the remote end or somebody in the middle possibly sniffing it out and seeing what you're backing up. So definitely get hooked up with Tarsnap. And I know we mentioned maybe New Year's, maybe you should set up a new router and whatnot. Well, if it's another year, guys. I know we've been talking about this for a while, but if you still haven't set up your backups, 2016 is like 2 weeks away.
Yeah. And, I made it my 2015 New Year's resolution to do proper backups. And I've been doing it every day since January 1st, twice a day with Tarsnap. And so far, I spent $1.67.
Wow. Whopping $1.67.
Because...
So surely you guys can afford that. That won't even pay for the tax on like a Starbucks. Come on.
Tarsnap has no fixed or minimum monthly fee. It's only 250 pico dollars per byte month for storage and 250 pico dollars per byte for bandwidth. And so that means that, with my incremental backups taking a whopping like 8 kilobytes, that, even though those files change all the time, they're getting backed up. It's not costing me a lot. And that's US dollars, not Canadian dollars.
Mm-hmm. So you guys should definitely go ahead and set that up. Man, it's a good thing he doesn't give away like a $10 coupon code for that because nobody would ever pay
Exactly.
for it.
Like I put in $20 thinking that I'd blow through it fairly quickly. And at this rate, it will last me until 2038.
That's right. That's right. So again, guys, tarsnap.com/BSDNow. Go over there and get set up today. Don't wait until sometime midway through 2016 when you've lost data and that system crashes staring you at the face and you're like, oh, I should have backed that up. You should do it now. Okay, well, let's see. First up in the Beastie Bits this week, we have an interesting one here about hammer mount is being forced to no A time by default. Is there anything you want to mention that about the sysctl there, Alan, since we started a little bit
wondering
on the chat room?
So that's per file system? Does Hammer... I'm trying to remember if Hammer has separate file systems like ZFS does where you create all the separate data sets. I think it does. Basically, I know on FreeBSD, when you use the installer that I wrote, the ZFS parts is set no A time for everything except var mail, which required it to tell if you'd read the mail yet or something. It messed something up if you didn't have it. I forget if it was the mail server, the mail client, or whatever. And so there was like one specific directory where I did want it. And I wonder if HammerFS has the kind of granularity you need to be able to do that. But yes, and the other thing we were talking about was that the sysctl maybe is named badly, being vfs.hammer.noatime equals 0 if you want A time. Instead of maybe calling it vfs.hammer.atime with the default of 0 and setting it to 1 if you do want it.
Somebody commit that. Or is it just historical reasons? It's no A time. I don't know. It is what it is. Okay, so of course we have next up here, show your support for FreeBSD. I know we've mentioned this before for the various, not just FreeBSD, but other BSD foundations. It's just about the end of the year, folks, so you want to get your donation in before it's too late so it gets counted for 2015. So if you can, don't forget to try and give a little donation. Sometimes it's more than just the dollar amounts that matter. You need a certain number of contributors to keep, for example, the 501c3 tax status here in the U.S. They need to show that it's not just 20 big corporate donors that are supporting this project. And to keep their organizational status, we want to get a bunch of donors for these. So if you haven't done it already, do remember to try and get a donation in either the FreeBSD Foundation or OpenBSD Foundation or whatever foundation you would like to support for the BSD of your choice.
Yes. So on top of a goal of raising I think it was $1.2 million for the FreeBSD Foundation. The other important goal they had was getting 2,000 unique donors. Currently, they're at 1,170, so we need 830 more donors. And so, yes, if everybody can go and just give even just $10 or whatever, then that will make a big difference.
For sure. So any of our listeners, if you haven't done that yet and you find any of these BSD operating systems useful, try and remember to do that in the next couple of weeks. I think that would make everyone have a good Christmas over there,
Yes,
for sure.
and if you're US based, your donation is fully tax deductible on your federal return.
Nice.
And the other big thing is that, the number of donors there isn't just for the IRS, also the companies they're deciding whether they want to base their next product on FreeBSD. Look at that and see, how many people actually care about this, or how big's the pool of people we might be able to hire to work on this and things. And so, it just shows that the FreeBSD project, and more importantly, the community, is still vibrant and going.
Well, it's a leverage thing too. When the community goes and talks to, say, a hardware manufacturer about, we need a driver for this, or we need you to better support this particular platform with FreeBSD, when they can point to that and say, we have this many donations and this number of people give, I mean, those are just good things to be able to have on hand. Okay, well, it looks like we talked a little about OpenBSD with Zen, but we have a little tease here. It looks like a post of OpenBSD running in Amazon EC2, T2 Micro. It says here there's no networking yet. Looks like Rake did this.
Well, we were just talking about this with the Zen support, right?
That's right. So it looks like it's on the verge of happening. So we teased you about we would bring you information when this shows up. And look, here it is.
10 minutes later.
I know, right? These guys work fast, man. Those OpenBSD guys. But this is pretty cool. If you want to go take a look at this, that'll get you excited for 2016. Maybe you'll be getting some OpenBSD love over in the Amazon cloud. Okay, and a quick reminder, the NetBSD 2015 quarter 4 package freeze is coming. So just a quick heads up. If there's something you need to get snuck into there before that happens, it looks like they're starting the freeze. Well, shoot, it already passed on the 15th. So the freeze has happened, it looks like here. So that will be frozen now, and we'll have a new package set here pretty soon, it looks like. Okay, and last up, this was an old story you reminded me of, Alan, where we had screenshots from developers for 2002, what their desktops look like.
Yeah, there's quite a few
It's
people.
been updated. Yeah, it's been updated to show 2015. So what are people running now? You want to narrate some of those?
So
I can't
the first one there is Brian Kernigan, who is the K and K&R, and wrote awk, or was part of awk, or the K in awk. Sorry, and they show side by side his 2002 and his 2015 desktop, and he says, "If you thought it was boring last time, check out this one." I think my favorite part there is that he's still using Nano. Although it's Alpine in this particular case. He's writing his email in the new version of Pine. Yeah.
Nice.
Richard Stallman says that he's in X, he uses the standard environment in Triskel, the Free Software Foundation's Linux distro. And other than that, he mostly types in Emacs in a console. But no screenshot still because it's Stallman. Anyway, Brem Moulinar, who is the author of Vim, provides his. You can see he's using Vim, Zimbu, and email, and the Chrome browser, showing up the Zimbu homepage. Resmus Lerndorf, who's the creator of PHP, shows his. He says not that much has changed in 13 years, still using Linux with a browser window over top of a bunch of terminals. The main change is that he switched from Pine to Thunderbird for his email. The OS he's running is Ubuntu with Unity, but with a lot of Debian packages shoehorned in there. And the other big change is that his son Carl is now much older. And then Warren Toomey, who's a Unix historian, he says how things have changed and how they have not changed. Still a command line junkie with at least 2 external windows open at all times, using the 3x3 virtual desktop. Instead of FVWM, he's using LXDE, and he switched from FreeBSD to Linux and is running Ubuntu. And he likes Firefox, GIMP, KeyPass, Shutter, Wireshark, Audacity, and Handbrake, and VLC. And goes on more details there if you're interested. And then Jordan Hubbard shows a screenshot of his OS 10 desktop, where he's got, Mail.app and Safari and Calendar and Slack and so on. The ID Software's Linux port maintainer shows his screenshot as code, and it shows his desktop configuration through SaltStack. So you can actually use Salt to get a desktop that looks exactly like his, using his little recipe there. Apparently, John Baldwin didn't reply in time to get his updated one on here. I wonder if they'll continue to add more as they get responses from some of the people. Okay. But it's quite interesting to see what's changed over the course of time. They also note that the update lacks Dennis Ritchie and Itojun, who have both passed away in the meantime.
Okay, well, let's get right back into the feedback here for the end of the show. So first up this week, we have Mark, who writes in. He says, hi, Alan and Chris. I've been listening to Jupiter Broadcasting for about 5 years now, and I really enjoy BSD Now and TechSnap. I've been playing around with different Linux distros for about as long, but Alan has swayed me to try BSD. Yes. He said, I have successfully loaded FreeBSD and OpenBSD on an old super slow Toshiba laptop from around 2005. I never could get it working on my MacBook Pro. I've decided to buy a BSD-friendly laptop and want to make FreeBSD or PCBSD my daily driver. I've considered System 76 laptops and Lenovo ThinkPads. Can you recommend either? What laptops do you run BSD on? I'm not a gamer, so fancy graphics cards aren't a factor. Just want something speedy with good battery life, and I can live with a 14-inch screen. Thanks for the great show, and don't tell Chris at the Action Show that you convinced me that BSD is the future of open source desktops. Well, your secret is safe with us and everyone else who just saw us read that. So recommendations for me here, the Lenovo's are kind of the way to go. And I know in the community that seems to be the popular choice. I have a T520, an older kind of boat anchor heavy laptop.
Yeah,
but,
I have the
new one that
T530, which is basically one generation newer of the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but my new one, actually, let me grab it real quick.
He's got a Lenovo X1 Carbon, which is the super slim, right?
So, yes, that's my new Lenovo. There's no stickers on it yet. I should probably work on that, but very slim. And so I'm running PCBSD 11 current on that because it needs the new IWM driver for Wi-Fi, and it works pretty darn well. I can't complain. It's a Broadwell video, which we don't have the native Intel driver for, so I'm using the SCFB driver, and then I get the native 3K resolution on, even though it's a little smaller screen. That resolution is awesome, and I've been really, really happy with it. And that would be my recommendation.
I would say if you can get Haswell graphic ones, which are slightly older now, but probably still purchasable. So that would be the something with a 40 in the model number, like a X240 or a T440 or a T530 or 540. Those ones will have there's basically a beta patch you can apply to actually get full accelerated graphics with that. Whereas if you buy something newer like the Broadwells, that'll be the X250s or 550s or whatever. Then you'll have to wait longer to get fully accelerated graphics. But if and that can make a difference even on the desktop. And I know the other sticking point sometimes is hooking it up to a projector. Is without the driver, you have more fun with that.
Yeah, that's true.
What I have here is an older X220, which I got on eBay for $200. Almost a year ago now. So they're easy to get, but anything in that line, if you can get the 30 or 40 models, then you'll have probably a little better luck. But you can make the newer ones work. They're just, and hopefully, Broadwell drivers aren't that far away from landing.
Yeah, hopefully, and OpenBSD guys have us beat there, or Dragonfly as well. So there's options to run different BSDs on these laptops as well. Okay, so next up we have Jamie writes in. He says, I love the show, or I think it's a he or she, didn't specify. I know my wife's name is Jamie, so it can go either way. But I love the show, and from it I discovered ZXfer. Could Alan go into detail on how specifically the grandfather option works in ZXfer? On my source pool, I have snapshots deleted after 30 days, but on the backup pool, I'd like to keep the backups much longer. I'm not sure I understand the explanation on the man page. Do I set it as -G365 if I want to keep the snapshots for a year on the backup pool?
Right. So to be clear, I didn't write ZXfer. I just maintain it now because the original author doesn't anymore. So the grandfather protection, the idea here is you specify the number of days old relative to system time at and above which snapshots on the destination won't be deleted. So basically it means if a snapshot's more than X days old, don't delete it. So normally when you set up ZXfer, you can have it, any snapshot that exists on the destination but not on the source, it deletes them. So that basically when you delete snapshots from the source, it will delete them from the destination too. For example, I take a snapshot every 15 minutes and replicate those, but I don't need to keep every single snapshot forever, right? After 6 hours, I start deleting the 15-minute ones and only keeping the ones from the top of each hour. And after a couple of days, I only keep, midnight and noon. And after a couple of days, I only keep one per day and then one per week or whatever. And so it's important that those get deleted on the far side. But sometimes you say, those ones I keep from one a week or one a month, I want to not delete those if I maybe I deleted it from the source to save disk space, but on the destination, I would like to still keep that old one. So basically with the grandfather option, you set the number of days, and if a snapshot is older than that, it will never get deleted. So the default of setting it really high is just how you say, don't delete them. If you set it to, some number, then it will not delete anything that's older than that. It'll assume that you're keeping that for archive purposes as opposed to it should just get deleted because it doesn't exist on the source.
Okay.
So you don't need to use it if you don't want, and if you do, you just set it to how old of a snapshot is considered so old that it should never be deleted. Automatically. You can always do it manually.
Cool. Okay, for the last one here, we're cutting it a little short this week because we get a really long story next up, but it's anonymous, and Alan had asked the person to share this story with us, so I'll let you read this with Alice and narrate what's happening.
The beginning of the story. So the person in question here manages a cluster of machines, which are all Dell C6220s, at the computer science department at a university, and are intended for computing-intensive jobs in the big data thing, so NoSQL databases and other big data type research. He said he took over the cluster from a colleague who had been running it using Ubuntu 12.04. He says, now I'm slowly but steadily converting it over to FreeBSD, ZFS, and Beehive, and some of the other niceties you get with BSD. I had established a bridgehead node for testing purposes, and it was running very well so far. Logins to the cluster are done via the department's LDAP server, which is out of his control. The machines in the cluster are pretty popular with students for their thesis work, research from professors, as well as a couple of labs that make use of the computing resources. At the moment, the cluster machines are given exclusively to a user, a policy that he's trying to change, for a certain period of time to avoid someone else interfering with their measurements and so on, right? So you get the whole machine, you basically get assigned the machine for a time period so that you know that there's not someone else also running something that might introduce jitter in your measurements or whatever. Sorry, I lost my place. As you can imagine, this results in a shortness of nodes pretty quickly because maybe you're not even using that much of the CPU, but you're taking over the entire machine. So it says, recently we got a request for a node for a student project in the middle of the semester. Apparently, they were using a VM from one of our central IT departments, which is a VMware vSphere, with a moderate NetApp filer for storage, and we're having performance problem. I'm not sure exactly what the problem was. They asked us whether we could use a node in the cluster he was managing for the project. They sent the requirements in an email. They want to run Ubuntu 15.04 or Debian or CentOS 7 with a preference for CentOS, at least 8 gigs of memory, 320 gigs of disks, at least an Intel Xeon E3, but the more CPU the better, and at least 100 megabit network connectivity. This clearly indicated that they had no idea what the real hardware of just one of our cluster nodes and were probably just citing what they previously got from central IT or whatever. Since the cluster had multiple times the hardware resources of in just one node, I thought it would be a waste to give them one of the whole nodes if they were, such a low resource requirement. So he set up a Beehive VM the first time he'd actually tried it on the one FreeBSD node he had in the cluster and gave him a 400 gigabyte ZFS volume. He configured Beehive to have 2 CPUs out of the 8 on the machine and 8 gigabytes of RAM of the 64 gigs on the machine. After installing and configuring CentOS, which was not a very nice experience for him, being the first time he's used it and being used to BSD, he gave them the IP address of the Beehive VM and a local user account. They were happy with it and were using the machine for roughly 3 weeks, without any complaints about performance whatsoever. As far as my monitoring tells me, they're using the machine, and the ZVol does have a couple of gigabytes of data in it, but not nearly the 320 gigabytes they requested, which is one of the nice things with ZFS. You can thin provision those so that everybody gets that amount of disk space, but you don't have to actually have that much backing disk until they actually start using it. So he said, one morning I decided to upgrade a couple of packages on the system, the FreeBSD system, which is running current, so you get the latest version of Beehive. He says, next thing he knows, the OpenLDAP client package, which get upgraded fine, but starts throwing errors, saying that it can't find libssl.so.8. Remember that the users of these nodes authenticate via LDAP, so the PAM plugin wasn't available anymore, which meant they couldn't log in. Which meant that no one, not even root, could log into the machine anymore. So that was a bit of a problem. Depending how you set up the LDAP, you can preference users to actually exist on the local machine over LDAP, so that you would still be able to log in as root on the machine, even if the LDAP was failing. So he figured the best way was to reboot the node, risk the downtime of the Beehive VM, and try to fix things in single user mode. Unfortunately, I had no recent ZFS boot environment to roll back to undo the update he installed. So it sounds like he would needs an automatic snapshot system, kind of like PCBSD has. After booting current from a snapshot ISO and using the shell environment, he was able to use ZFS import with an alt root in order to mount the pool off the system and have access to it. Then chroot into that directory, and then it's almost as if you're running on that machine, and was able to successfully recompile the OpenLDAP client from ports, so it would link against the version of SSL he had. Luckily, I was able to log in again, and even the VM was unaffected by this. No one even complained about the downtime or that CentOS was rebooted. He says, there are certainly better ways to handle this failure scenario, but it worked nonetheless. I plan to extend this support further with more FreeBSD nodes and even more Beehive instances. ZFS and boot environments, which I now create before installing an update, make disaster recovery very easy and painless. Also, I found that although Beehive is still young, or younger than its competitors, it is mature enough to run VMs for your users. If a student project is having performance problem on the big vSphere installation and not having any problems on Beehive, that can say a lot. I said, I think they will never figure out that they're not using real cluster nodes and are instead running in a VM that is only a few resources from that node. This reminds me of a quote from Scotty in the Star Trek episode Relics. He's like, do you mind a little advice? Starfleet captains are like children. They want everything right now and they want it their way. But the secret is to give them only what they need, not what they want. He says, I think this does apply a lot to more people than just Starfleet captains.
That's right.
So what happened there was, so he was running FreeBSD head from a couple of weeks ago and months ago, and then installed a package that was built only a week ago. And in the meantime, FreeBSD head has upgraded the version of OpenSSL from 101 to 102. And so the packages were compiled against OpenSSL 102, but his machine only had 101. And so when he installed the newer LDAP client that was linked against the newer version of SSL, his system didn't have that newer version of SSL. So his other avenue of fixing the problem would be upgrading his base OS. But basically now he knows not to grab newer packages than his version of the base OS if a big change has happened in the meantime.
That's right. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for writing in that story and a lesson learned. Hopefully, that'll avoid somebody else some pain in the future.
I've seen
Make sure
the
you get those snapshots beforehand.
I've seen that same problem with the libSSL on the mailing list a lot in the last couple of weeks since that upgrade.
Yeah, it has definitely cropped up a fair amount.
I think the main reason it didn't happen so much in the past is we didn't have the binary packages. And so when you compiled from ports, it always linked against whatever version of SSL you have.
Sure.
But yeah, that'll be an interesting thing as we look at packaging base and having people have different versions of FreeBSD is either having to make sure you're lockstepped in which package repo you're using, or to make sure you always update your base OS before you update the packages.
Yeah, we're going to make it so ours are all lockstep. Yep. So the package of the base and kernel is the same one that's compiled with the packages. Yep. So you're always in good shape there. Okay, well, again, thanks for sending that in. We appreciate it. If you have more stories like that, we would love to hear them as well. And the way you can send those to us is feedback@bsdnow.tv. That's the address we monitor, and we get a lot of email. Matter of fact, we've been getting a lot of great stories there recently, people sending links and ideas. So please keep doing that. We appreciate it. We try and get as many into the show as we can every week. And, of course, it doesn't have to be just a link or a story. If you want to get in touch with us because you're doing something neat and want to come on the show and do an interview, we would appreciate that as well. We are more than eager to get new folks on here and talk to them about all things BSD, regardless of which one it is. If you're doing something cool on Dragonfly or Net, we definitely want to hear that too.
Want to hear from you.
That's right. That's right. So again, folks, send that in to feedback@bsdnow.tv. We don't watch the comments on YouTube and all the other places you can listen to or watch this show. So try and send it to that one location. We'll make sure if it may not get replied to right away, especially if it's a story, because we might just throw it into next week's episode and respond to it there. But we definitely will read it and keep an eye on everything happening there. So thank you guys so much for watching the show this week. We'll look forward to talking to you next week, right before Christmas. And if you're like me and you're going to go see Star Wars in a couple days, I hope it's awesome and it blows all of our minds, and it should be great. But I'm sure I'll have comments about that in a future episode, and I won't spoil it for anybody if you haven't seen it yet. So I promise I'll be good. Anyway, we'll see you guys all same time next week.